Hi, I'm Phil LeDuc, and I'm here to talk to you about the 5 things I wish I knew before I became an activist author. Number one, if you write something that doesn't make at least some people angry, you're probably not writing anything worth writing. I learned a long time ago when I was a young man writing for a local paper with a readership of about 5 that no matter how innocuous your point, people get very PO'd. And over some really stupid stuff. I've had death threats. I've had an 80-year-old man say he was going to kick my derriere, for lack of a better one, keep it YouTube friendly. And even a woman who threatened to send a bomb to my house. For what it's worth, I never thought of myself as an activist writer, but I do write about subjects that people are uncomfortable writing about. I use language that's aggressive, and there's a reason for that. A couple of years ago, maybe a decade, I criticized somebody in my blog because they were making assertions and didn't have any data to back it up. One of my readers wrote to me a very nice letter and said, "You know, Phil, you don't you make assertions and you don't put in citations, you don't say where you got that information. What makes you different?" I said, "Number one, I'm not writing a scholarly article. Two, I'm asserting my opinion in an opinion piece." But it really bugged me because I realized that it's been a while since I had a psychology class. So I went out and I went on to a book website and I bought 15 textbooks on the human brain, how it works. And what was fascinating to me is most of what I learned in psychology classes is bunk. The one who got it the most right was Freud. Now that we can do MRI of a brain when somebody is feeling something or doing something, they found that when they're making a decision, they're using the emotional part of their brain. And scientists now know that when we make up our mind or change our mind, we're actually using an emotional response. So when you think you're thinking logically and making your mind up based on this fact or that fact, what you're actually doing is your mind's already made up subconsciously and you're looking for facts to support what you already want to do. So, if I gut punch somebody, if and figuratively in my writing, if I get them riled because of punctuation errors, if I get that under their skin, metaphorically, I'm literally getting under their skin when it comes to the decision making. Somebody who gets emotional when they're reading what you write is somebody who can change their mind. If you don't do that, they just say, "Well, he didn't consider this," or "I don't believe that," etc. Number two, you can't affect change by telling people what they want to hear. People need to hear that what they believe is wrong and why. But again, you need to hit them emotionally. Years ago, I was working at a business consultancy. I was a partner, and it was a global consultancy with offices all over the world. I mentioned a customer in one of my blogs, and my boss freaked out. "That's one of our customers. Oh my God, what are we going to do?" And he went all the way got all the way up to the CEO. Everyone was in a flurry, and I didn't even say anything. What I said was the particular brand of my first car was a piece of shit. And it was. I'm sure the manufacturers knew. It was not, made in 1976. It was not a great car then. It wasn't a great car when it came off the factory floor. They knew that. I knew that. Everybody knew that. But they were too worried about that until one of the top executives said, thought leaders don't just tell people what they want to hear. They challenge people's worldview. They challenge their belief systems. So when you are an activist author, you're challenging people's worldview, and they will defend that worldview, sometimes in a very ugly way. Number 3, people will hate your baby and tell you it's ugly. There's two things at play here. No matter how important or how much you love and how passionate you are about this topic, there are some people who just don't care about it. I think of all the things that I see out there about this cause or that cause. And maybe I don't run around screaming from the world that I don't like that or I don't believe in that. Most of it is just, I don't care. It doesn't affect me personally. So you want to make sure that you don't get too wrapped up in there. I've always been a fan of the poem If by Rudyard Kipling. Many people recognize the quote of the first line of If from the movie Apocalypse Now. If you can keep your head while all those about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. But I like the second line. It's really kind of a personal credo. And it says, if you can trust yourself while all men doubt you, while still allowing for the doubting too. So I want you to just think about that. Just because people hate what you're saying, just because people will say, oh, he doesn't know or she doesn't know what they're talking about, doesn't mean you shouldn't stick to your guns. But also, you should consider that maybe your book is a piece of crap that isn't worth reading. Learn from either. Number 4, a lot of people don't care about social justice. And I think I need to level set here. I'm not saying that people are indifferent to suffering. People care about starving children wherever in the world. People care about wars and threats of wars overseas. But when I say care, I mean they care enough to do something. If you care, but all you do is care, that really doesn't do anything. Also, awareness. If you're aware of something, but you don't do anything with that awareness, you're really not doing any good. So while you may sell books, while you may have people attend your lectures, while you may have people telling you swell, if you're writing a book to affect change, you don't want people to say wonderful things about you and your book. You want them to get out there and change the world. At least I do. And remember, you change the world one mind at a time. Number 5, publishing a book isn't cheap, and it's not all that easy. There's 2 routes you can go. 1, you can self-publish. Idiots self-publish. Why? Because they don't have to have facts. They don't have to have accountability. They're basically just putting their books out there and they're footing the bill so they can say and do anything they want. Some people need editors. Everyone needs editors. Now, if you've read any of my books, they're rife with typos, grammatical errors, incomplete thoughts. I had to beg and plead with my publisher to allow me to put out an edited version of Lone Gunman. Why? Because I was reading it and frankly it was embarrassing. I don't mind a couple of typos and grammatical errors, but I do find it bothersome that a book on that subject has incomplete thoughts. So the problem with my publicist is I tend to write stream of consciousness, and I tend to be very much like you're having a conversation with me. She said, an editor is going to destroy that. And so when I wrote blood in my pockets is blood on your hands. I had my daughter, who's a professional editor, and it has lived with me her life until I became an empty nester. She knows how I talk. She knows how hard I can be to follow when I'm talking. And so she cleaned that book up. She did an excellent job. So we're going to reissue Lone Gunman, having her had edited it. But I'm going to do some more on that. Okay.
Can we stop the video?
No. So back to what my original topic about it not being cheap or easy. So if you're self-published, yeah. But I had a book on a plane. I was very eager to. It had a very provocative title. It was something that I was looking for to as research for an article I was writing. And the first thing that the person wrote was, I didn't learn all this in some college somewhere. And I learned this where it counts, on the shop floor. Well, I've got a problem with proudly stupid. If you're stupid, if you have trouble working a spoon, I'll help you. But if you're proud of your stupidity, if you're anti-education, you're anti-intellectual, I don't need to hear a bigot, whether they are through a recognized federally funded hate group, or if they're just an individual who says, I don't wear a tie to anything, and they show up at their father-in-law's funeral wearing work clothes instead of a suit because they're too cool to have appropriate apparel. So I'm reading this and it lost all credibility for me. One of the things you want to do is establish your credibility, and that is difficult. That's something that comes with an editor, that comes with advice from your publisher. A lot of us, and especially the self-published, think, no, this is wonderful, this is beautiful, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. But it's not. It's tripe. Years ago, a friend of mine was bugging me, write a book. So he was a published author, he wrote a children's book. But he gave me this book on how to get a book published. It involved market research. It involved how many books are already out there. So how many people are going to read it? If you figure that you're going to have a readership of 500,000 potential readers, and you're going to get, and there's already 25 best-selling books on that topic, you're probably not going to sell any books. So it's not cheap. It's a money pit. It's constantly putting money into things like publicity, things like speaking engagements. So writing the book in itself requires a cash outlay. And even big publishing houses will screw you over when it comes to money. A friend of mine got a book deal to turn his doctoral thesis that he got from Yale into a book, a business book. And I read it. It was great. Very conversational, very readable. And so he got I won't say the publisher, but he got a publishing deal from a publisher that you would recognize unless you've lived under a rock for the last 100 years. He got $50,000 in advance. So he did what? He spent $50,000. But he thought it was in advance on royalty. It was in advance on publishing. So when the book is published, they bring up literally a truck filled with books. He had $50,000 worth of his own book. And they needed a check from him for $50,000. So there's all kinds of hidden fees and surprises because you know what? When people provide a service, They want to make money. And that's basically it. So those are the 5 things that I wish I knew just off the top of my head. Actually, not just off the top of my head. I had to write it for an interview. But the point being that I could probably come up with 100 things that I know now. Like, for instance, when you're a public figure, people think they know you when they've read your book. And they have no problem saying, one person introduced himself by saying, "Oh, you're Phil LeDuc, I hate you." And I said, "You don't even know me." "Yeah, I've read your thing." And I said, "I read your t-shirt. Now, should I hate you based on that?" But it's kind of that Hollywood thing where actors spend their entire lives trying to be famous, and once they get famous, they hate it and they want people to leave them alone. You can't have it both ways. So I want to say thank you for listening to those 5 things before that you should know before writing an activist book. You can tell I'm an author. I'm gifted with words. The words just pour out of me. A lot of them don't make any sense. A lot of them are ums and they're not deliberate. But anyway, thank you for listening. Enjoy life because you only get one.